In the period after the Civil War, New Orleans was considered the most racially liberal city in the South.
In the period of Reconstruction, New Orleans basically chartered freedom for black people here. Liberty, enfranchisement, interracial marriage, public education, improved literacy, to some extent economic opportunity had all been made available to them.
You had integration, not only racial integration, but integration by class. Well-to-do whites living in close proximity to poor whites. Working class blacks living in close proximity to blacks and whites who were better off than they was.
In the 1890s, Jim Crow came to New Orleans. Public transportation was legally segregated. Homer Plessy, a Creole of color, challenged the law, all the way to the United States Supreme Court.
Plessy was not an accident. There were activists in New Orleans who were very determined to challenge Jim Crow laws in that city. And when they passed the Railway Separation Act and required that black people sit in the back of railway cars, there were people who thought that this was illegal and immoral, and they sought out to challenge it.
He was purposely chosen to be a plaintiff in the case because he looked white, and he had been mistakenly seated in the white section of the train. The whole argument was that until he identified himself as black, there was no problem. Only when he told them that he was colored was the problems, and he was told either he sat in a section reserved for color or he had to leave the train.
Plessy, like Rosa Parks, was in the first-class car of that to challenge this law. It's really startling when you think about that, because here, 35 years after slavery, is a very organized political movement led entirely by African Americans aimed at confronting Jim Crow through the legal procedures, through the legitimate procedures that change in American society.
In 1896, the court, in a landmark case known as Plessy versus Ferguson, sanctioned segregation as long as the separate facilities were equal.
Plessy was an extraordinarily significant case. It legalized Jim Crow. It legalized separate but equal. This was the court that spoke not just for the South, but for the whole of the United States. It could have been an opportunity for America to move up the timeline for racial reform and civil rights in this country. Instead, it was a terrific setback.
What Plessy basically says is that whatever the state is doing, the federal government is not going to get involved. They're going to let the state legislate segregation if they want to.
2 years later, the court allowed states to legally disqualify blacks from voting. In Louisiana alone, the black vote dropped from 130,000 to 5,000.
By 1899, 1900, it was becoming apparent African American rights and opportunities would be eroding from this point on.